Hi, guys, and happy Monday. I thought to start this week, we're going into the third week of economics. I thought probably you guys are feeling a little bit, like you're probably a little lost, I would imagine. So I thought we would maybe slow a couple things down and give you a little time to practice a bit with what we've already done. So here's the assignment that I want you guys to do. What I want you to look for is I want you to look for just any old news article, and I'm going to get rid of myself here so you can see what's going on my screen. So I guess I shouldn't say any old news article, but instead I want you to look for a news article where you can see that someplace, so you see here that I'm looking at a part of California. It's an earthquake that happened in part of California. So I want you to look for a place where, or a news article where some place where their production possibilities, meaning their potential to produce, how much they possibly can produce, where that's changed somehow. And then we're going to graph that and use it. Let's look at, we're going to keep coming back to this article, but let's look at, let me try to clarify a point for you guys. When we're looking at the production possibilities curve, remember, it's only a tool. It's not gospel. It's not something that anybody would use in a real economic situation because, again, it's a very simplistic model. We're saying that there's two things that a country can produce. Well, remember, that's ludicrous. Of course, many countries can produce many things, not just two. We use two because it's simple. We talked about the keep it simple student principle, or maybe that was my other class. Anyway, but we try not to make things overly complex. And we start with a simple idea and then allow ourselves to extrapolate that logic into a more complex idea. So, if we go back to what we looked at over here with fish and firewood and my three friends, well, of course there's other things than fish and firewood that these three guys could have done. They could have gone and looked for help. They could have set up a tent. They could have, gathered other types of food than fish. So we do that because we're not really trying to figure out how much fish and firewood somebody can produce. Instead, we're trying to make this point that certain resources are more useful for certain things. And if we don't apply those certain resources in the best way possible, we end up someplace, inside of the PPC, we end up producing a little bit less than we possibly could. And again, if we go back to day one, say it, what's the word we studied on day one? It rhymes with scarcity. That's right, scarcity. If we go back to this big economic problem of scarcity, one of the ways we try to solve that is to make sure that we're not wasting things. If resources are already scarce, certainly we want to make sure that we don't use those resources poorly. And essentially that's what we're getting to with the PPC, is that the closer we can get our actual output to our potential output, the blue line, the PPC, the closer we can get to that, the more efficiently we're using our resources. And again, it's just to get that idea across, to say, well, for South Africa to try to make themselves a major trading destination would be a big mistake. Worldwide trade is always going to go through the Suez Canal. It's always going to go through the Panama Canal. It's never going to come down around the tip of Southern Africa and be a profitable enterprise for South Africa. So if the president or somebody says we're going to make South Africa a major seafaring nation, it's going to be a major port, that would be a waste of resources. South Africa's resources are better used in a different way, and that's what we're trying to get to with this. As far as the mathematics of it goes, well, again, that conversation I just had, it was kind of a messy discussion. I was saying, well, maybe South Africa isn't very good at having ports and, Panama Canal, blah, blah, blah. So in economics, we like to use math because math is very cut and dry. It's very black and white. If this math is correct, and again, we understand that that's an assumption. We're saying if. But if it is correct, then it's very clear from the math who's best at doing what and where those resources go. So again, it's not a practical exercise. Remember, back in one of the first videos I gave you guys, I said, don't get caught up in trying to make economics really compatible with day-to-day life. The first year of economics, we're studying very theoretical ideas, and then we're going to apply them lightly. We'll do some of that today, but we start to apply them much more in depth in the second year. But this first year is really about learning to think economically, which is it's a big mind shift. It's different than what you've done before. So we have to learn to think like an economist. We have to gather the tools that an economist uses, and then we have to apply those to problems. So don't allow yourself to feel rushed. We have to take it slowly, and that's okay. So let's try to apply the PPC to something that's a little bit more real life. Let's go back to the article. So here, all I did was go on, I think, yahoo.com, and this was one of the first stories I saw. Now I'd like you to find something different from a different news site. It could be Yahoo, I don't care if it's that. But, find something that's not about this earthquake in California. All I did was find this article, and again, because I think like an economist, I saw, there's an earthquake. It's calling it a strong earthquake, and it says that there are injuries and damage. That means that wherever this earthquake was, there's less potential for it to produce than there was prior to that. It's not because they're not using their land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. It's because the quality of their factors of production has changed. It's been destroyed, it's not usable right now, whatever. So find an article like this, and then I want you to start going and looking around. And I'm going to take a picture of this and put it over onto a OneNote so I can mark it up a little bit, because I want to show you a few things that I want you to do. Okay, let's look at just these first two paragraphs, because already in there's a couple of nice little things that line up well with what we've studied already. So in yellow I've highlighted that, okay, first of all, it's California's wine country. What are we talking about there? I want you to take a second at your table just with a partner, take about 30 seconds. I'll give you a chance to pause the video. I want you to think about in that little bit, from what we've studied so far, when it says California's wine country, what does that relate to best? Okay, so what do you think? There's a couple things that I thought of. First of all, it relates to our factors of production. Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Well, California's wine country, it's clearly talking about something to do with the land in California. Certain amount of rain, certain amount of temperature. I don't know. I'm not a wine person, or I don't grow wine. But clearly it's talking about the factor of production land, and it's saying that California, it's got this part of it that is useful for making wine. That also then gets to the first question of economics, which you would have studied already, well, I hope, which is, what shall we produce? Well, one of the options, and again, remember, there could have been other options out there as well, but one of the options was, we can make wine. We have the right type of land, the right type of climate. There's enough people who want to buy our wine. We can make wine. So two things that this relates to that you've studied already, the factor of production land, and then the first question of economics, what shall we produce? And again, you'll see that those two often are going to go together. All right, let's look down at the second thing in yellow, where it says that gas-fed fires damage some of the region's famed wineries and historic buildings. And let's have a think about maybe what is that getting at? Okay, so this one is pretty similar to the first. It's simply pointing to another choice that they have, which is probably some people are coming here as tourists. They want to see the wineries and the historic buildings, and now it brings in a bit of a question. Are they still going to have as many people wanting to come see them if these wineries and historic buildings have been destroyed or damaged somehow. So this in yellow we can easily look at, and we can represent this on the PPC. Now again, remember, we don't need to go in and calculate anything here. We're just trying to show a concept. So why don't you guys take a second and from just what's here in yellow, see if you can't see if you can't sketch a PPC that's going to show what we have here. Okay, so again, when you think about setting up a PPC, you always want to have two products, a product on the x-axis and a product on the y-axis. Oh, I did that wrong because I was thinking about where you guys were. But anyway, the y-axis and the x-axis. So let's look. I set mine up this way, and I said, okay, well, Napa, they can produce wine, or they can produce tourism, or some combination of the two. A couple elements of my graph I want to make sure that you see. Again, I've got a label here. I'm calling it PPC1. If I were going to actually talk about this, I would say, well, Napa, that's the part of California it's in. I'm not sure if we said that. I would say that Napa could produce, anywhere along PPC1 prior to the earthquake. Now again, the second I say before the earthquake, I'm letting you know we're going to talk about what's going to happen after the earthquake. You can also see that I've put a point on here so that I have something to refer to. I don't want to speak about the curve in a general manner. It's going to sound better. It's going to be a better conversation if I can talk about, well, on PPC1, the most they can produce is this value here, W1. I don't need to give it an actual value. You can if you want. You could call it, 100,000 barrels of wine, but W1 works too. So I can say if they choose to produce W1 barrels of wine, they can only produce T1 tourism. And that becomes important once I show the change that's going to happen after the earthquake. So if you weren't set up like this already, if you're missing some element, add it in now, and then I want you to go back and show what's going to happen, where is production going to be after the earthquake. Okay, so mine is going to look like this, and let me point out a couple of good elements, what we call good elements of a graph, that you should be aware of. I've labeled both of my curves. I've shown which way the movement occurred by showing arrows pointing down. And then I've put in a new intersection along the old place. So now I can say, instead of talking about a new W1 or a new value for wine and a new value for tourism, I can say if Napa wants to continue to make W1 amount of wine, they have to reduce the amount of tourism they can produce to T2. So I might here too just show a little shift or a little change there, that T1 is going to move over to T2 for them to continue to produce the same amount of wine. Now again, why did the PPC shift in? And again, we would say in because it went towards the origin. It went towards the, where the X and Y axes come together. Why did it shift in? Because a certain amount of factors of production were destroyed. Okay, what do I want you to do with this? Well, you guessed it. I want you to find an article, and I want you to set everything up, figure out what you're going to do and how, maybe rehearse a couple of times, and I want you to show me with a PPC everything that you can from the article that you chose. I want you to film yourself. You can do it with a screen capture tool like what I'm using, or you can just use your phone and have somebody film it and you draw on a piece of paper. Anything like that's fine. So see how you do with this, and just try to point out as much as you can from the article about what we've learned so far this year. Okay, I look forward to seeing these and you sometime in the near future.